Hi there, and welcome to today's webinar by Intersection Group. I'm Milan Günther, and today we talk about the story of Severin, who is a service designer making the leap into enterprise design. Today it's just me, but I will try to keep an eye on the chat. So if you have comments, questions, and so on, please don't hesitate to write something. And there's a chance that I actually see it. All right. So just to give you a little bit of background, so we are Intersection Group. We are a not-for-profit organization based in Vienna, even though we are all over the world. I'm in Paris. And we like to think that we help people create better enterprises. And there's a little asterisk there because sometimes we have to clarify what we actually mean by better. And there in the small print, like enterprises sometimes make you read small print, it says enterprises that pursue a clear purpose, that are useful for people in their lives, and that perform and deliver on their promises. So that's what we mean by better. We know that's a very ambitious endeavor that we are on, and so we have the Milky Way behind, just to show that our galactic ambition. But all of that is also a reference to some things that will feature in today's story. So just to give you an overview of what we are doing. So we are working on the first release of Edgy, a language for collaborative enterprise design that we will release as an open source product in a few weeks. And today is basically a preview of something that is some elements that are inside there. We are also running community and building a community and running events like the Intersection Conference series. And we also write books and do learning offerings and run webinars like this one. As I said, today is about service design, and sometimes we have to clarify that by service design, we do not talk about web services or service-oriented architecture. So it's not about technical services, it's about services delivered to people. And for people who are not really familiar with service design, or maybe even if you are familiar, but you want to read a really good book about it. So Lou Down, this is her at our conference in Copenhagen in 2016. So Lou wrote a book about service design called Good Services, which I recommend a lot if you want to go into what we mean by service design. And of course, web services might be a little part of it, but think of it rather like something like the postal service, or today we are actually talking about this as our case study. So our case today is one that doesn't actually exist. We call this company Intersection Railways. It's a fake company that we use as an example enterprise of sufficient complexity and at the same time something that most people can relate to, because you might have taken a train and interacted with railway companies. So Intersection Railway is a formerly public railway company from a small European country. Maybe the one I mentioned, can also think of some other country. Now it's competing on the European single market with other companies like the French, the German, the, Scandinavian, Swedish, Finnish, and UK railways. The company has passenger railway, but also freight, and it builds and runs its own infrastructure in its home country and then uses other companies' infrastructure in other countries. And so today's story is in 5 chapters. This is chapter 1, and we start our story with Severin. This is Severin, a service designer, not actually employed by Intersection Railway, but working in an agency or design studio that is part of a consultancy. Think of like one of the big fives that bought some design studios over the last few years. Severin likes to map out journeys and concepts and processes. He owns the service design deliverables like service blueprints, personas, also working quite closely with user experience designers, user interface designers, but also business design. It's a relatively new discipline in the agency. And of course, developers. So mostly on digital products and services, but also beyond, especially aiming beyond as a service designer, using qualitative and also sometimes quantitative research and running design thinking workshops or design sprints and so on with clients. And Severin really thinks that service design is the way forward to deliver customer value, to make enterprises be valuable and useful to people, and that for that what he needs to do is make sense of a lot of messes. We will get into why enterprise design might be interesting for Severin to look into. So what happens in the story first is an email. Severin gets an email from one of their clients with a tender, like a call for offerings. And it's a lot of text. And, if you work in a consultancy, you might be used to this. So a lot of blah, blah, blah about what the client wants to do. But in there are statements like, for example, we want you to help us support and leverage the ongoing digital transformation in our group. We want to design new services based on a digital platform to deliver transport capabilities to our clients. And of course, the obvious and mandatory mention of delivering an innovative and outstanding customer experience as part of this. It's quite boring. He reads through it, used to it, try to find the nuggets of things that really are important in all the blah, blah. By the way, a lot of this blah, blah is existing because of compliance reasons. So I'm not blaming anyone if you have to write something like this. But what he then does is actually trying to clarify with the client, what is it that you really want from us? Where can we actually help you, or what can we help you with? And so the marketing director says, the tender, you read the document, but what it really means, what we really want to do is we want to reintroduce night trains across Europe. And with that, we want to beat our competition, not only our direct competition like other train companies, but also, for example, airlines, buses, and so on. Airlines in particular, because we think that there's a new sense of people who want to train sustainably, who want to avoid flying. So we think that there's a niche for us to play in this European market with a service offering on night trains. And we know, she says, that top-notch customer experience is key. And then she says something that, again, if you are in an agency or in a consultancy, you might have heard a lot. We want to be like Apple and Google. We think of like if you imagine Apple iTrain, that's kind of what we want to build. Super exciting. And maybe you can help us with that. Please make an offering, reply to our tender. And that makes Severin dream like, wow, okay, so we want to compete with maybe even upscale offerings in the travel market. There is this notion of, luxurious hotel-like trains like the Orient Express, with a bit of literature behind it and films and so on. And so it's like, okay, maybe we can really make something radically different to today's train journeys. It doesn't have to be luxury, right? But it should feel like you are comfortable on board. You go to sleep one night and you wake up in another city, and you had a good night's sleep, or maybe even a good time on the train, similar to a good hotel. And so, as he starts to imagine these new services, we conclude chapter 1. So think of this app, you open it and it's like, okay, you want to go to Paris tonight? I can recommend it, actually. It's quite sunny and nice, even though a little bit cold. Book your bed now. Simple, easy, comfortable. And so what we learn in the first chapter is the client talked about user interfaces, about digital apps, about digital platforms, digital artifacts. But this is actually a quite limited scope if you think of the night train service, right? Because there's actually the actual train, there's the schedule, there's all these components, there's the staff, what they are doing, and so on. And they are often, especially if your job is called user experience or UX designer, it's kind of out of scope for you. Like you're like not supposed to go into that because you are responsible for the app or the digital service. But if you look at it from a service design perspective, holistic perspective, you're actually see that all these components of the enterprise make or break the service, right? If something is wrong on the train, or if something is wrong in the service delivery, your experience will suffer, and there's nothing that your app or UX or UI design can do about that. And also thinking about these things, like from a human-centric perspective, can open up people's minds towards like envisioning the future of this enterprise, envisioning the future of the service, what it might be. And so we move in chapter 2. We are a month into the project, and we call it a bold vision because Severin, as we saw in the beginning, a quite ambitious service designer. So the first thing he does is screen some existing documentation, asking the client, okay, what do we actually know already about the customers, about their journeys? And they're like, yeah, well, we have all this stuff. Yeah, we sent you here the journey maps. We have this like path depiction, how people navigate today on our website. We made personas. The personas are even partially informed by qualitative research and quantitative research. We also have all the numbers, the analytics of how people use our apps and so on, but also, of course, in the larger sense, the traffic and the usage of our current services and so on. Basically, they come back and say, okay, what do we need? We have all sorts of stuff, right? And it becomes kind of a filter or filtering challenge. Like, what of all the stuff is actually relevant? What can help us avoid repeating things that or like activities that we already did, trying to find out things that we already know, but also where are the nuggets, the treasures of information, of knowledge that we can actually use for our service design and experience design. Another thing that is very good service design practice, I would say, or experience design practice is, yeah, try it yourself. So Severin takes the night train, waits here at the station for the thing is like for the train to arrive. It's cold, and then on the train, you see here. It actually is quite different from what he imagined it might be with the future service. Quite rudimentary cabins, far away from the Orient Express feeling. But yeah, it's important to see, okay, what do we have today? What can we do today? How does it feel? Also, how does it feel before and after? To book it, to get the ticket, to get to the station, to get on the train, to check in. Is there breakfast and so on? And collecting insights from people, right? So interviewing passengers, for example, also about the possibility of a night train and making sense of like all the observations. Here you see them in a room in the consultancy with all the photos from the field and quotes and so on. And some passengers, for example, say, well, yeah, it's a good idea, but the current app wouldn't actually work because it's about travel times. And, you know, with the night train, I don't actually care when I arrive, really, as long as it is in the morning. It's really more important about the comfort of a long night ride. And can I actually sleep? Can I work? And so on. And another passenger is asking, like, is there a possibility to reserve a meal? Because, yeah, I don't want to just bring my food. Is there any breakfast? And so this looks also into the scope of like, what are we actually working on? Is it just the room? Is it just the train? Is it just the app? Or is it also services like, for example, food and beverage? And then also goes to the other side, to the delivery side. And one frontline employee, maybe a conductor on the train, is saying, well, you know, it's all great what these people in the headquarters dream about, but our sanitary equipment and signage systems are in a really bad shape. Before we dream of any new products and services, we need to fix this first. All of this is being compiled and fed into workshops. Here you see, for example, a design thinking workshop running with the client. And as we often see in these kind of workshops, this is actually a picture from IDEO, who are kind of behind, or one of the actors behind the Notion, is that there's a lot of creativity, a lot of insight, a lot of ambition on the designer side or on the design team side. But then in an enterprise, you often also, or you usually have some of the guys on the left looking at all of this quite skeptically and asking, well, does that fit into the roadmap, into the budget and the project plan, and who will be accountable for this? And can we actually pull that off this year? Do we have the capacities? And you know, what about compliance? What about this and that? And yeah, so one of the ideas behind enterprise design is take all of this into account. Design with the enterprise as a material that we need to reshape in order to deliver great products and services and so on, because in the end, it's the enterprise that will deliver this. But in design thinking and in traditional user-centric, human-centric design, it's more it's more about usually the customer, finding out what the customer needs and then trying to make up some change in the enterprise to deliver that. And this is where it often falls apart. So Severin knows that, and so goes back to a classic service design technique, which is service blueprinting, basically mapping out the customer journey on top via different channels. What do people do, mobile and in person, and so on? What goals are they trying to achieve as they go through the service of traveling, or this experience of traveling at night? And then on the bottom, there's the section of backstage processes. Everything that needs to happen on the enterprise side. And with all the documentation and all the quotes from the frontline people, he has the feeling that he has actually a grasp on what's happening in the enterprise. And by the way, if you're interested in the technique, I really recommend this book, Service Design by Andy Polaine and his co-authors. Also a classic that explains the technique of service blueprinting. So mapping these things out and working in the design thinking workshops and so on leads to a prototype that you see here on the left, taking into account the insights that people want to dream about, where they might want to be tomorrow, that it's more about comfort than about times. So it's more about the date than about the exact time. It's a rough prototype, right? It's not, the visual designers haven't seen it yet really. But it's important in any design project and in service design in particular to go beyond the improvement of something that exists already, looking into what might be and formulating a bold vision. And the insights that you might need for that are often hiding in existing documents, repositories, data, past project outputs, and so on. So there's a tendency to reinvent the wheel, also sometimes because of the not invented here syndrome that might be on your team or on your client's team or on your team that you've built together. But all of that said, all of this never replaces actually talking to real customers, real passengers, trying the things that you want to redesign yourself, and going into the field and getting like a feeling of how is it today and what are all those moving parts that need to change in order to deliver on our vision. And it's very good to keep the conceptual thinking in sync with the prototyping and envisioning on a more applied level. Like here, the prototype and the blueprint should be in sync. So all of that is very well. We are moving into more of a detailed design of what should the service really look like. So we want to go back to the field, and Severin wants to talk to like a few customers and do some study. What is actually like behind some of the insights and some of the needs that have been identified, some of the tasks that have been expressed. And in order to get the next round of budget, there's a meeting with the leadership, and he's going in there quite confident, saying, "Okay, yeah, we have this vision, and we know all of these things, and we have screened all of your existing documents. We have the blueprint that is quite solid. Can we have the go ahead for the next phase?" And here you see all these smiling people are actually the people in the meeting from the client. They're smiling, but they are actually quite confused and a bit reluctant to give the green light. So, for example, the senior leader is saying, "Well, all of the stuff that you're showing us is actually about trains and people and services delivered in the physical world. Aren't you on this digital team? I thought it's about an app. Are all these new things in scope? Like, I don't know, a pre-ordering a custom meal. Maybe you wanted, I don't know, kosher or halal or vegetarian or vegan. Is that actually in scope? Because we would have to change quite a lot. And you, as the digital person, comes around the corner with this." And then food and beverage says, "Yeah, actually, we cannot really deliver that right now. Like, is that actually a requirement? Because we are not capable of that in our food and beverage department. And strategic planning says, whoa, all these routes, all these destinations, that's very unrealistic. Initially, we can do a maximum 2, well, maybe 3 if we stretch it. So your prototype is already like, doesn't really work, at least not in the midterm. And then HR is saying, well, for all of these new skills that are required to deliver your services, we have to retrain everyone to learn how to basically deliver a hotel-like service. Who pays for that? Is that in scope? Is that in the budget? And then the customer service guy basically says, well, you're kind of only talking about a new app, but isn't it the whole ride experience? Like, don't we have to touch all the call centers and basically everything that I'm doing? Isn't that also in scope? And yeah, so there's a lot of confusion, and Severin is a bit, well, disconcerted after the meeting, has to go back into the consultancy bosses and say, well, actually, I'm not sure how well this is going. And then, big surprise, there's an email from the contact, the senior contact on the client side. There's a reorganization. So until now, they worked for the marketing and communication department and the digital channels team. There's also a digital development team in the IT department that was supposed to deliver this digital platform and digital app. And the executives have decided that these are merging into one department called digital and IT, which also means there's a new boss and a new, well, most important person on the client side. And yeah, someone gave him the blueprint, so he calls for a meeting and he says, well, you know, the bottom part of your blueprint, I don't see anything that's actually going on in there. It's a fantasy of you and your colleagues and some marketing people from our company, how the business is running, but it's not how we are actually running. Those features that you have in your prototype are not supported by the digital platform that we're planning. But no problem. I sent you a 250 document with the requirements, what we are actually developing, and then you can scale back and align your design to what we can actually do. Are you sure all of this is aligned with our annual plan? And do we know who's actually responsible for delivering what? And all of these things that you propose are very, very expensive. Do we actually know which of them are really, really needed? And you see also in the same room in the meeting is this girl with sunglasses. Severin is not sure what to make of it, very quiet in the meeting. But at the end of the meeting, yeah, well, basically he goes back and they shared some of the, because he's like asking like, okay, can you share, well, if it's all unrealistic, can you share some of the documentation, how our service is actually running? And CIO and head of digital saying, yeah, well, yeah, of course, no problem. I have someone from our team send you the architecture documentation. And yeah, the document looks like this. There are like maybe 5 of this. Severin doesn't understand anything what's going on there. It's very technical, and yeah, there's a big gap between the design work and the architecture work apparently. Moreover, a lot of the things that are surfacing in these meetings with the new client contacts are going into quite a bit of complexity on the delivery side of something like a train service embedded in a heterogeneous European network. Here you see all the European routes managed by the different companies. So it's quite difficult to plan and schedule and work with all the regulators and all the competition that also partially gives you the infrastructure or has to give you the infrastructure because of open market regulations and so on, different signage systems, different like technical capabilities and also habits, operational habits of these different countries to actually implement something like going from A to B at night. And there's also a lot of change with real-time tracking, with satellite support, with all sorts of new capabilities, energy optimization, and so on that comes into the design of the new railway. So, yeah, remember the vision. So Severin is quite disenchanted and is not sure whether this project will actually go anywhere with all this new resistance, and kind of asked himself now, do I have to bury my vision or our vision of like a hotel-like experience on the night train, or is there a chance to rescue it and to bring these people on board and to actually make sure it's viable? And yeah, so the girl turns out she's an enterprise architect and says, we should have a coffee. I can see that you are very confused, and this is like quite a lot that we talked about today. Because Severin has all of this stuff in his mind about KPIs, pricing, recruiting new people, new skills, the brand reputation, the service delivery model, the operating model, the backlog of development, the values, the roles, the policies, the rules, and so on and so on. And by the way, Ernestine also has a story like the one that I'm telling today from an enterprise architecture perspective that Wolfgang is telling, and you will all get the recording and the slide deck afterwards, and there's a link to that video if you want to understand her perspective and what enterprise architects actually do. And so she also shows him a model that is coincidentally the enterprise design facet model, part of our edgy language. And so it is asking a set of fundamental questions about any enterprise that you can basically pull out your sleeve and ask in the round of whoever you are talking to, just to clarify if we are on the same page. As we do important changes and we plan an important vision of our future enterprise, are we sure we know why we do what we do, how this fits our purpose, why we exist, what really matters to us, our identity? Are we sure that we know how this will be operating and what we are capable of and what we need to be capable of? So the architecture that needs to be in place to make this happen. And are we actually sure what the role is in people's lives? The experience part, which is kind of Severin's angle where he comes from. And only if we know all these three things, if we have clarity on this, then we can say we know what we are doing with the changes that we are planning and envisioning on the enterprise. And we also have intersections between these different facets. So in order to deliver on why we exist, our purpose, we have to organize ourselves and work together as a team internally, but also maybe with outsourcing partners, and translate this ambition into a working operational architecture and capabilities that we deliver that then result in products in the loose sense of products and services and offerings, that we are making an offering for people that appear in people's experiences and that in turn will influence their perception and the image of our brand, which is the reflection of our identity in people's experiences. And so you see that in the beginning of our story, we started from the experience, we looked into product, and then we kind of hit a wall when architecture came into focus and people said, well, our bottom blueprint is actually very unrealistic. So we need to get a better grip on the architecture facet in order to design our product in a way that we actually can deliver, and at the same time reassure our new bosses and client stakeholders that we actually know what we are doing in the experience and product facet. And so in order to do so, Ernestine also shows Severin this element model that is behind the facets. So there you have a set of enterprise elements that you find in any enterprise. We will not go really into detail in this. It's a kind of a architectural thinking behind Edgy. But the idea is that any enterprise is composed of elements and relations, and we can model them. We can model the current state, and we can model potential future states and also gaps and changes using these elements and their interrelations. So, for example, we can look at what are the tasks that people actually want to do, what channels, what journeys do they go through, how does our product actually appear this, and what processes and capabilities and assets does this product depend on, who's doing what to deliver it in the organization, and so on and so on. And one of the models that Ernestine has in her backpack is this one. It's called a capability map. And there you have everything that the enterprise architects have modeled that intersection railways can do. So we have things like customer-facing capabilities, like we need to inform our passengers and we need to sell them tickets, and we give information as well. That's the freight, so it's not really relevant for this project. So you see also what's happening in other business lines. We also have our train operations, the scheduling, the running of the trains, the energy management. We have the infrastructure behind it, and we have shared capabilities, like we need to be compliant, we need to manage risks, we need to operate our IT, and so on. And she proposes that we actually look at the bottom part of the blueprints and we sync it with the capabilities to see, is this actually realistic? Can we do what, is there any capability that we have identified in the map, in the architecture, something that we can do that is required to deliver this service? Or is it something that's missing? And then we can ask all the stakeholders, should we develop that? Should we outsource that? Should we build it ourselves? And basically make a reality check for our blueprint and our vision. And so this is one, like the service blueprint is one of Jim Kalbers and Paul Kahn's example of an alignment diagram, aligning what an organization is offering to individuals through interactions. And just to give you, so if you're interested in alignment diagrams, they are much more than just service blueprints. Just Google it, and there's a paper that I recommend. But basically, if you map that to the enterprise design facets and elements, you see that on top we have the experience. In the middle, we have our products and our brand of interactions between individuals, between people we are designing for, and the organization. And then the organization translates also, or serves basically implementing our architecture, our capabilities, what we need to do and what we need to do well, and our identity, our purpose, like what are we pursuing and why do we actually exist. And so if you express a service blueprint in Edgy, it looks like this. So it's a visual language for enterprise design. We have our journey on top, what our customer goes through, our passenger. We have the different channels. We have the different tasks. Some are yellow, I will get to that. But so we have the different tasks that they need to, like outcomes, personal outcomes they want to achieve, like getting ideas for new trips, making plans, booking tickets, go to the station, actually arrive. We have everything that we put into place in order to serve these tasks across these journeys and channels. Like maybe you have a trip recommendation engine, we have a route planner, a ticket shop, and so on. Onboard services like the mentioned food and beverage services. And then below, we have our capabilities and organization. So we have our organizational units like marketing, sales, customer experience, operations, and so on. And who's doing what, which capabilities are actually linked to delivering these products and services to then appear in people's experiences. So after chapter 3, the world has a bit changed. You see Severin is now actually drawing quite technical diagrams here on the wall, maybe in something like BPMN, or maybe it's also informed by an Edgy diagram. But what is important to remember from this chapter is an enterprise, yes, has an external ecosystem, external market, and it is incredibly important to understand what people want and how to be useful for customers, right? And so the markets and also the supply chain, like who do you need to partner with to deliver, really important. But then there's also an internal ecosystem of our organization, how we use our assets, IT and physical and so on, our data and our operating model, our operations. And if we want to really deliver ambitious service designs, have significant changes on services and service experiences, we need to take this into account. We need to look at what in the enterprise matters, what can we ignore, and what needs to change in order to deliver this ambitious change. Otherwise, we might just improve, like marginally improve or iterate something existing because we accept a very limited scope, maybe just app user experience or user interface, maybe just something like onboard services, but very limited and not actually delivering on this ambitious vision. And so the obvious focus of service and experience design is, of course, the customer, in this case, the passenger's reality. But a lot of opportunities and also potential showstoppers lie in enterprise elements that are traditionally out of scope. So in order to turn the project around and bring people on board Severin asks, gets back to Ernestine a few weeks later and asks, well, is there any kind of thing that I can draw that everyone would understand, that everyone can relate to, so that I can really explain not only what the service is supposed to do, like in the blueprint, and not just like a selection of what needs to change in the enterprise. Can I maybe depict the whole enterprise and highlight how there's a synchronization between what the customer is going through, what we are going through as we are delivering this, and what needs to happen before and after. And Ernestine says, well, first of all, let me introduce you to Odile. Odile is an organization designer. Again, I recommend the book put here, and also watching the story of Odile. She's in HR, working for the HR department, and basically saying, well, you know what? I talked this to the CEO, because normally organization change have access to the C level, unlike marketing, product, service, enterprise architecture, IT, business architecture, and so on, because usually C-level people know that it's about people and it's about the organization. So she goes to the CEO and says, well, you know what? Let's make this whole project a pilot for co-designing the organization, the future organization. I need a good pilot for this anyway. The night train project is very ambitious, it's strategic. So let's see if we can work together and have an architecture view, an enterprise architecture view, an organization change view, and a product and service delivery view, and sync them up. And I really recommend, by the way, this book, Designing Organizations, by Naomi Stanford. If you want to look, the webinar linked here is actually with Naomi on how to bring the people and organization perspective into our work. So Ernestine and Odile invite Severin for a meeting and says, you know what? Yes, there is actually a simple model. And you might know this Simon Sinek golden circle. So he says basically a lot of companies know what they are doing. So yeah, we are a train company. Some companies are knowing how exactly they are doing that. And this is where it gets into our service blueprint troubles, right? So we are not actually sure how our operations work completely. This knowledge is a bit hidden in business and operations experts. And very few companies, Simon says, know why they are doing the things they are doing. So, so what they are now doing is trying to make one visual, one map that fits basically on a napkin in its simplest form, that depicts what we are doing as an enterprise again and again. And we can also map why we are doing what we are doing at each step. And then we have our customer going through their journeys. And in between, we have everything we need to do, our how, so that our what is actually being delivered. So so our purposes, our internal and also externally dependent capabilities and processes that then deliver products and services to make it have a meaning in people's lives. And so this maps to the facet model, right? So we have our identity, our purpose in the middle, our why. We have what we do for customers, their experience at the on the outside, and we have to bridge this. We have to bridge our ambition and what our customers need and want through an architecture. And so one thing that Severin does to focus is a top task identification. I will also not go into details about this one today, but if you are interested, there's a book by Jerry McGovern about this, the top task how-to guide, and also a webinar with Jim Kalbach, he wrote mapping experiences and the guide to jobs to be done. But basically, it's a survey, and you collect all the potential tasks that people want or might want to do with the help of your enterprise, and you put them all into a big survey and ask at least 300 people which of these matter the most to you, which are the most important tasks. And here you get the result, which is usually, or like in 90% of the cases, unless you are in an environment of extreme complexity and diversity of stakeholders, will follow this pattern, that you get a very, very few tasks that get a majority of the vote. So 25% usually of the vote get into this yellow segments. This is the stuff that really, really matters to people. So if you design your enterprise and your service to really serve these tasks extremely well, you will deliver a superior customer experience. So here we have an example: times and routes, booking a ticket, getting on the train on time, because everyone hates to miss their train. And also, we're not traveling alone. We want to plan with friends or with our loved ones. Then you have tasks that are also important but less. Usually it's about 10, or a bit less, like is there Wi-Fi, what about the meals, and so on. Then you have tasks that are even less important. And then you have this long tail of tasks that are often quite surprising to people inside the enterprise, because maybe they wanted to put priorities into city guides in the marketing department, or but then it turns out using this quantitative check, what really matters to people is something else. So this gives us a priority, a sense of priority and of importance, which of the tasks are really important for customers, and that also we can link to which of the capabilities are really important, where do we really make a significant impact on the customer experience. And so, the enterprise on a napkin technique that people pull out of their that Ernestine and Odile pull out of their sleeve basically is called the Milky Way Map. It's going to be part of Edgy in the near future. You already have a webinar coming up next week on this. So basically, it puts the enterprise on a circle. And here you see an experience focus Milky Way. So we have our passenger and what they go through in phases and what kind of tasks are really important to them. You see here we marked the top tasks in yellow from the survey we did before. We also have some channels depicted here, some KPIs like a conversion rate, for example. And we can mark a quite complicated journey, like, for example, planning with friends is actually an optional task, but it's an important one. But you only do that, of course, when you want to go with friends. And so with that, we can depict the customer experience, but we can also depict what we have to do to serve the customer. And this is basically, so what we have here is the second level capability map capabilities from Ernestine's capability map from the architecture. So we know that we need to build and maintain our routes. We need to do the scheduling, manage our products, do the marketing and communications. And you see here, the marketing and communication is positioned in a way that we reach our customers as they search for times, fares, routes, looking for trip ideas, and so on. So you have a contextual alignment over this circular model between the architecture and the experience. And then we also have, we ask ourselves in each of these segments that we go through as we build our offerings, as we develop and market them, as we operate and learning and optimize in this never-ending circle, what is it actually that we want to achieve? Well, we need to operate cost efficiently. It's basically everywhere, so we put it at the bottom, but then we also have goals. Actually, these goals are coming from our annual mission, vision, and purpose statements that are coming from the C-level. So they say we want to be adaptive for new technologies, we want to build a shared infrastructure, but ultimately we want to bring people together. How do we do that? Well, yeah, we need to appear in their lives as they make plans. We want to achieve seamless mobility, so you don't have to wait so much between trains. We want to be punctual. We want to be make it comfortable and convenient, and of course safe as you travel. And so you see here that there's on the napkin, we achieved this alignment over time in a scenario between what we are set out to do, what our customers want from us, and what we need to put in place in order to serve them. So what we learn in this chapter, first of all, while the top task turned out it was a big breakthrough for Severin, because he could come back to his new boss and say, you know what, we found out that these 4 tasks are really important. So let's focus on them first. And that also gives us a feeling where in the capabilities we really need to invest, and where we can maybe look at it a little bit later, or a little bit less, like scale down our ambition a little bit. So this evidence is really important to get. Then in order to align changes in the organization, product and service design and experience design ambitions, and operational and architectural constraints, and also potential changes, a visual common geography, as it is provided here on the Milky Way. This is an actual example from Scania of this kind of map. Helps having the right conversations, because people can find themselves and find their colleagues and basically navigate. If we change something here, that also means we need to change something there. There's a dependency. And it's a shared reference just by introducing this circle in the middle, saying we all go together through this. We all look at the enterprise from different perspectives, but it's actually the same enterprise. And we need to clarify that if we want to achieve this for the customer, and if we want to pursue this kind of goal, that's kind of that's what we want to change in our architecture, or in our product portfolio, or in our organization or our brand. Last chapter of the story, how do we actually make things happen? So about 4 months later than originally planned, as it is often the case in these kind of projects with large corporates, Severin is trying to bring the baby home. By now we have different Milky Ways. So we have, for example, this one that looks at the architecture in more focus. So we have the third level capabilities from the capability map, so that we can actually look at train scheduling short-term, train scheduling long-term. I realized that in GetResponse, these might not be perfectly readable, but you will get the PDF of the slide deck afterwards. And so with that, we can actually go to the operations planning, to the and the enterprise and business architects, and say, okay, look, here in this phase, we want to do this and that. We want to deliver custom meals in like a custom dinner to people that they order before on their app on our night train. What do we have? What can we do right now that we can use for that? What do we not have? What needs to be added? Should we do that ourselves? Should we hire those people? Should we outsource it? Should we work with an external provider? So in there you have senior management, you have human resources, you have IT, you have operational planning, and all of them have to kind of understand each other. And so as we go through this and we look at prototypes and they become more and more sophisticated, like maybe we want to prototype what it looks like for the customer, we want to prototype what we do with the data, where do we get it from, we want to prototype the process, maybe using facilitation techniques like Lego, or we might want to prototype what are the KPIs that we are tracking and what might that look like. And we can geolocate these prototypes on the Milky Way and say, well, this prototype is here and this is there, and this is how they are connected. We can overlay the organization over the capabilities and see, okay, here's our org chart, here's our Milky Way, who's doing what, and what is really important. What changes are really important? Who do we need to talk to? And is this organization actually, does it make sense, or should we change something in the organization as we deliver this new service and this big change? And we can look at very specific scenarios. So the exact scenario that I talked about before. So we want to check in as a customer, as we have our task here, check details, pack and prepare, arrange local transport, going to station, get on the train. And as we check in, we want to select a meal that then is delivered by the onboard services, which is serving this have a snack task, which is green. So it's a secondary important task. And then we can put in the capabilities, actually the IT systems, and see, well, as we make our menus in our product management, as we plan our logistics, how does this then go into marketing and communication? How is it communicated to the customer as they buy the ticket? What kind of menu and meal options they have? How do we get this to the pass app application that is responsible for the check-in process? And then how do we make sure that the selection of the meals actually reaches the crew as they prepare the train, and then is delivered by the train restaurant to the people? And you see here that this is not depicting the whole enterprise, but we have the whole enterprise as a context, which is one really important concept in enterprise design, is yes, we only change parts, but we have the context of not only the different perspectives, like the experience, identity, and architecture perspectives, but we also have the context of what other people are doing in the same context. For example, as we have the train restaurant operations here, we also have emergency bus scheduling because sometimes our trains break down. So what happens to the meal when there's a bus instead of a train? Like these questions you can see and you can ask by having contextual visualization. So yes, as we conclude the story in the chapter 5, so it is important for service designers, organization designers, architects, and everyone involved to go out of your comfort zone, embrace the enterprise as the true scope of the change that you want to deliver. And that means you might have to venture into different domains where you don't really feel comfortable, and it might be frightening, but it's important that well, the only way to actually deal with something as complex as an enterprise is to embrace the fact that we are co-designing it together with other people coming from different directions and looking with different lenses at the same thing. And so, yes, we focus on what we know best first. So Severin focuses on service design and experience design, and Ernestine focuses on architecture and Odile on organization. But then we make space for other viewpoints. We understand each other. We translate between our viewpoints and contributions, and we all contribute to one change that will touch all of these parts of our enterprise. And here you see actually an article in the New York Times about from a startup that wants to deliver exactly this kind of night train service in Europe. Just to tell you that this is a realistic story. You have seen maybe the little icons and depictions under each chapter. So these are the enterprise design patterns that Severin employed as he went through this personal journey of or this project. So that you have the personal enterprise vision, hint, instead of telling, you have wearing their shoes, like going into the customer shoes, but also maybe frontline staff or back office staff shoes, understand, really develop empathy for people and what they go through. Focus, shift, refocus, like if you feel stuck in one perspective, one facet, change to another one and see if that gets you unstuck. Talk maybe to someone else that you didn't have on the radar before. And depicting shared understanding as in the Milky Way map and with Edgy, so that we actually can understand each other. So this concludes today's content. There are 5 minutes left for questions. If you have any question or comment, please write it into the chat. As you do so, yes, this is just one webinar of a series. So next week, Wolfgang and Annika is the person behind the Milky Way technique. She will and they will have a webinar on the Milky Way Enterprise Map, same time on Wednesday, and I will be back the week after talking about capability maps. So as a deep dive, if you're interested in capabilities as a kind of stable alternative to process or organization views on what the enterprise actually needs to do to deliver any kind of change or product or service, please tune in there. And also announcing our 9th Enterprise Design Conference. We will launch our call for contributions soon. This year will be in September in Vienna. If you're interested in enterprise design, please consider submitting or attending. And here are all the links if you want to get involved to the books that, well, our books, but you will also have the other books in the deck. And the starter kit, the conference videos from the past are free on YouTube, the webinar archive, and also please join our Slack if you are interested in getting into enterprise design, meeting the community, and developing this for your practice. Someone is typing. So Neil is asking, have you seen an organization make the leap to Edgy before having a mature EA capability? Yes. Actually, a lot of organizations that we work with do not have a mature EA capability. I do not see that as a prerequisite. It actually can be the other way around, that Edgy insights, especially smaller enterprises, that don't have the like the big challenges that usually lead to EA emerging as a really important thing, which is compliance, which is yeah, like complexity of operations and between IT and other operational aspects. So if you don't have that, then usually things are decided more ad hoc, especially in startups, in smaller enterprises, sometimes even in government. And in that case, it can be edgy that brings the architecture perspective for the first time. But the other way around is also often the route. So we have a kind of mature architecture practice. We have a kind of mature design and experience or product design practice. We might have some people that design the organization, and edgy is actually there to bring them together and elevate all of them together to a new level by syncing between them and translating between them. That makes sense. All right, then thank you so much for joining today, and tune in next week, and hope to see you on Slack, and have a great afternoon or day.